Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about simple versus compound interest. So to get started, let's take a look at the definition of interest. So interest is simply the fee that financial institutions charge to borrow money. If you are taking out a loan, they charge that fee to you. However, if you give them their money, what's called an investment, they give you that money. So let's take a look at how simple interest is calculated. So interest I is calculated by simply multiplying what we call the principal, which is the amount of money that you're investing, times the rate, or the interest rate, always given as a percent, times the time, and generally the time is given in years. So we're going to start with an example. Our example is going to be, you invest $1,500 at 6% simple interest for a period of 3 years. So to start, let's first identify the principal. We said the principal is going to be the amount of money you invest. So in this example, our principal is going to be $1,500. Next, we want to look at the rate. So we said the rate or interest rate is always a percentage, and that will be this 6% right here. So our rate is 6%. And when we use this in our formula, we want to change it to a decimal. So we're going to change that to 6 thousandths. All right, and then the third variable we need is time. And for the simple interest formula, time is generally given in years. And so for this example, we're going to have 3 years. So at the end, we're going to figure out the amount of interest. Remember, interest is a dollar amount. So we're trying to determine how much money we'll get back at the end of 3 years by investing $1,500. So we'll start with our interest formula. Remember, your interest formula is I is equal to PRT. So we've determined that our principal is $1,500. So we're going to take $1,500, we're going to multiply it by our rate, always written as a decimal, and times our years. So when we multiply those three numbers together, we get 270. So our interest is $270. So at the end of our 3-year investment, we now have our original principal of $1,500, and then the bank is going to give us an additional $270 for allowing them to use our money for that 3-year period. So at the end of 3 years, we now have $1,770. And remember, the only thing you had to do to get that $270 was let the financial institution use your money. That's the benefit of investment. The only thing you had to do was be without that money for that period of time. Now we're going to take the same investment and let's compare what would happen if our investment was paying compound interest instead of simple interest. One of the things we have to pay attention to when we look at compound interest is we want to look at how often our interest is going to be compounded. And so in this example, we're going to compound the interest annually. And when we talk about compound interest and we say we're compounding the interest, that simply says that's how many times we're going to calculate the interest. In this example, we're only going to compound it annually, but different investments can compound it in different periods, perhaps semi-annually, which means they would calculate the interest twice a year, or monthly, where every month they would calculate the interest. The more often they compound the interest, the more money you'll make in that investment. So we're going to start with this example. So again, we're taking a look at the same variables. we're going to have our interest, which is what we're trying to calculate. Remember, interest is always a dollar amount. We still have our principal. Remember, that's the money we're investing, and we're still sticking with that same $1,500 investment. Next is our interest rate. Again, that's going to be a percentage, which we're going to then change to a decimal for calculating purposes. And then lastly, the amount of time. And again, we're talking about time in years in this case. So here's how we're going to start with our calculating our compound interest. What we want to do is we want to start by calculating our interest 1 year at a time. So let's start by taking a look at our year one interest. So after our first year of our investment, our interest would be the amount of principal we have, so $1,500, multiplied by our interest rate. And since this is just for 1 year, going back to our simple interest formula, we would multiply it by our time. But we're only calculating it 1 year at a time, so we don't need to multiply it by 1 because we know multiplying any number by 1 does not change its value. So at the end of year one, we do this multiplication, $90 in interest we've earned for that first year. So this is where compound interest is different. What we do when we go to calculate our interest for year two is we take that $90 and we include it as into our principal. So for year two, our principal is not $1,500, but it's $1,590 because we get to earn interest on the $90 of interest that we earned the previous year. And this is the power of compound interest. We get to earn interest on our previous interest. So we're going to take our same formula and we're going to multiply $1,590 by 600. And then when we do that calculation, we earn $95.40 of interest for year two. So now at the end of year two, we've earned another $95.40 of interest. So going into year three, we have a new principal for year three. We're going to take our $1,590, we're going to add our $95.40 to it. So for a year three principal of $1,685.40. So now we're going to calculate the interest for year three by taking that amount and again multiplying it by our interest rate of 6%. And when we do that multiplication, we get $101.12. So at the end of year three, which is the final year of our investment, we now have a total of $1,786.52. And if we take a look at the amount of interest we earned for our entire investment, we can see the first year we had $90, the second year $95.40, and the third year $101.12. The amount of interest we earned increased each year because our principal was increasing each year. So we end up with a total of $286.52. So let's recap and compare the two investments. Remember, this was a situation where you would be without your $1,500 for 3 years. Under a simple interest investment, for that 3 years, you end up with $270 at the end, with a total of $1,770 that you get to put in your pocket. But under an investment earning compound interest, our $1,500 turns into $1,786.52, and we end up with a total of $286.52. So we get an additional $16.52 from that compound interest investment. That may not seem like a huge difference, but remember, you didn't have to do anything other than be without your money for either investment, and that was just over 3 years. The power of compound interest truly comes over longer periods of time. So I hope this information was helpful and you can find it useful as you continue with your math career. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.